I'm Hazem Seeker. This is Counting the Cost on Al Jazeera, our weekly look at the world of business and finance. This week, the devastating floods in Pakistan. Already savaged by internal conflict, Pakistan's economy takes another battering as floods wash away homes, farms and roads. Who will crack first, Blackberry or the governments forcing it to hand over access to user communications? And are all roads to the Middle East paved with gold? Despite horror stories, would-be migrant workers still queue up. Well, Pakistan's economy has almost been paralyzed by internal conflict and the global financial crisis. So the worst floods in history couldn't have come at a worse time, especially if you consider parts of the northwest frontier where people had to flee the fighting between militants and the army. The floods stretch from the north of the country through to the breadbasket and richest region, Punjab, and it's heading south to the populous Sindh province. Well, let's break down the numbers for you. According to the government, the so-called war on terror over the last 8 years has cost the country $35 billion. The country had to turn to the International Monetary Fund for financial help, $11.3 billion in total in November 2008. Pakistan's economy did actually record growth of 4.1% in the financial year to June 30th. Well, agriculture accounts for a fifth of the economy. With the floods washing away crops, it could put further pressure on the country's ability to feed itself. According to relief workers, at least 1.3 million acres of crops have been destroyed. Kamal Haider has more.
More than 1 million on the move. Their belongings and livestock loaded on whatever transport was at hand. Others on foot, desperate to escape the rising waters. I'm in the southern Punjab district of Muzaffargarh, where the authorities have issued an order for evacuation. It's a mass exodus. People moving with their livestock, with their bicycles, whatever they can find, they're taking out. In this mainly rural region, it is farmers who have suffered the most.
There is my home. My family was lucky to get out, but my home, my land, and everything in it has gone.
When the Indus River, Pakistan's longest at more than 3,000 kilometers, burst its banks, it quickly submerged entire districts of the southern Punjab. Locals say the scale of the flooding caught authorities out, and little or nothing was being done to help the people cope.
Nothing is happening. No government action, no aid or help.
Women and children find space on transport trucks, but in making their escape, none of them know when they can return home. And for those left behind for now, they can do nothing but wait. Many had journeyed in from outlying areas, some seeking shelter at the local railroad station. But even here, the advancing waters were encroaching at a speed, forcing more and more people to keep moving.
So as we concentrate on the economy, poor infrastructure has really held back the country. And to see what further impact the flooding will have, I'm joined by economist Saim Ali from Standard Chartered in Karachi, Pakistan. Thanks for being with us. Now, it would be fair to say that Pakistan wasn't in the best of health before this latest crisis. The country's paid a heavy price for the war on terror, some $35 billion. And then the financial crisis has meant it had to borrow billions more from the IMF.
Absolutely. The economy is facing probably one of the most difficult times in history. The cost of the conflict, which is ongoing in the northern parts of Pakistan, the spate of terrorist strikes within our key cities, has had a very real cost as far as the Pakistan economy is concerned. The people have had to pay through higher taxation, through record high inflation over the last 3 years. So the economy was already suffering because of the impact of the war on terror. And now because of these floods, the economy is going to take further hit.
And from what our correspondents are saying, roads, bridges and other vital infrastructure have been washed away. That alone could run into billions of dollars.
Absolutely. The scale of the devastation, although we still don't know the exact estimates, but the flood has flown through the entire length and breadth of the country. So starting from the north right up to the south, the key infrastructure, whether it's roads, the road infrastructure, telecom, as well as the power infrastructure. So it's caused massive damage. And the two main cash crops which are sown in Pakistan, including cotton and sugar, both of them, there's reports of severe damage to those crops as well. So the scale of the devastation is still unclear, but given the past experiences, the estimates could be anywhere between $8 to $10 billion.
And the floods have hit the breadbasket of Pakistan. What's the likely impact of flooding on the economy?
Yes, the economy is already right now, we've seen it's going through a very difficult phase. Record high inflation, debt situation is getting worse progressively each year. And because of the cost of this flooding, the damage to the infrastructure, the reconstruction, rehabilitation work that will have to be undertaken over the next 2-3 years, the impact on the economy is going to be severe. Growth is going to be impacted. Record high inflation already persists, and we could see inflation spiral out of control. And of course, it will mean that further taxation will have to be taken by the government to fund this reconstruction activity. And Pakistan will remain dependent on foreign financing to help do the reconstruction work in these affected areas.
So can a country as fragile as Pakistan then keep on taking these shocks to the system? Will they need to turn to the International Monetary Fund? I mean, let's be honest, international donors have made promises in the past, but that money hasn't been forthcoming.
That's correct, because of donor fatigue, because we've seen the donor community come to Pakistan's rescue many a times in the last 4 or 5 years, whether it's the 2005 earthquake or after the financial crisis erupted. And the donor aid has been slowing down. So hence, it does pose a significant challenge. Domestic resources are not ample to meet the reconstruction and rehabilitation costs. So Pakistan will remain dependent in the near term. However, if you look at past experiences, Pakistan has the amount of charity per capita that Pakistanis give is the highest in the world, according to the Aga Khan survey. So hence, there will be a lot of public support to the government activities for reconstruction. However, the costs on the economy are huge, and unless there is some donor funding, significant donor funding coming in, the cost will be borne by the local domestic consumers through high inflation and through higher taxation.
So finally, what's your rating of this government with the way they've handled the crisis post-IMF and now the flooding?
Well, it's been the most difficult of times that this current regime has taken in. They could have done things in a much better way. However, we are seeing some progress, especially under the IMF-financed stabilization plan. We have seen the imbalances reduce. Inflation has come down slightly, but a lot more needs to be done. Remember, this flood is really a man-made disaster. If Pakistan had built the necessary water reservoirs or dams, we could have survived this. The rainfalls were heavy, but if we had the storage capability, the flooding could have been averted. So really, we need to ensure that we learn our lessons from these crises and come out stronger.
Saim Ali in Karachi, many thanks for your time. Well, from floods in Pakistan to record temperatures in Russia, the country is witnessing the worst drought in half a century. Fearing shortages at home, Russian Prime Minister Vladimir Putin has banned the export of grain and flour. Putin says Kazakhstan and Belarus should also suspend shipments, and the dry weather extends across parts of the European Union, Ukraine and Kazakhstan. All that has sent wheat soaring to the highest prices in almost 2 years. Wheat output in Russia, the third biggest exporter, could drop 19% to 15 million tons this year, and exports could fall 23% to 14 million tons. Now, the drought looks unlikely to ease. Much of western Russia continues to be gripped by high temperatures, and with them the risk of more forest fires. Emma Haywood has more.
The Russian countryside has been ravaged by fire and drought. 20% of the country's wheat crop has been destroyed. The agriculture industry under threat. So much so that exports of wheat are being banned for the time being. That sent wheat prices soaring, and the cost of goods such as bread are likely to rise.
Due to abnormally high temperatures and drought, I believe it's reasonable to introduce a temporary ban on grain and wheat product exports. Yes, we have sufficient reserves, 9.5 million tons, but we need to prevent a rise in domestic food prices.
More than 600 fires are still raging across Russia. Close to one of the country's top nuclear facilities, teams try to create a firewall, removing the trees which could fuel the flames. More than 50 people are known to have died in the fires, and anger is growing about what the authorities are or aren't doing.
Everyone is suffering because of the lack of action by the authorities, and because the authorities are more worried about themselves rather than about the country and its people.
As smog smothers Moscow, the more damaging long-term effects of this heat wave could be felt further afield. All the farmers can do is pray that their once fertile plains can be restored.
When counting the cost returns, Blackberry hasn't underestimated the determination of some countries to ban its smartphones. And queuing up for a chance to work in the Gulf, India's jobless putting themselves at risk for money. Welcome back to Counting the Cost, your weekly business and finance stop right here on Al Jazeera. A research in motion, probably a name you haven't heard of, but you will be aware of the product it makes, Blackberry. In the headlines for, well, depending on where you stand, all the right or wrong reasons. Middle East countries and some like India and Indonesia want Blackberry to open up its networks so that they can monitor communications. They cite security reasons. Saudi Arabia, India and the United Arab Emirates account for about 5% of Blackberry's 41 million users worldwide. But all are hugely important growth markets, important to Blackberry as well because its traditional North American market is stagnating. Dan Nolan has the view from Dubai.
The battle against Blackberries here in the Gulf is raging towards all-out war. Saudi Arabia gave just a few days' notice before banning the device's messenger application starting from Friday. Here in the United Arab Emirates, the ban won't begin until October 11. But pressure on Blackberry's Canadian makers, Research in Motion, is being increased in a different way. The biggest telecommunications provider here, Etisalat, is offering its Blackberry customers a range of different compensation packages. The best of them is one of these, a free device from Blackberry rivals Nokia, Samsung or Apple. Now, Etisalat is 60% owned by the UAE government. So on the one hand, the government is banning Blackberry email and messenger, and on the other, it's handing out free rivals to eat into Blackberry's market share. Of course, many people use Blackberry because they prefer it over the iPhone. We spoke to a few of those people affected to see what they think of this offer.
You know, my Blackberry is very, I don't know, I'm really in love with this phone. So it's really difficult for me to switch.
I am a Blackberry addict. I've been using it for the last 2 years, and I would be really happy if I can continue with Blackberry. And if it's not Blackberry, then I don't know, I'll just have to think because I'm not comfortable with iPhone.
Just about every business contact I have or client I know has a Blackberry. And God, it's going to be like having the right arm cut off when this happens.
The cause of all this is just how secure Blackberry's encrypted data is. If I send an email on an iPhone or a Nokia, it can potentially be seen by third parties such as government intelligence agencies. With a Blackberry, it can't, and the UAE government claims this creates a security risk it's not willing to accept. US authorities do have the ability to view Blackberry encrypted data, but only if they have a court order. The UAE wants Research in Motion to provide them with the same access. And if they do, prior to October 11, then this war will be all over. In Dubai, Dan Nolan for Counting the Cost.
Well, joining me now to discuss all these issues is Francisco Geronimo. He's a telecoms analyst at market intelligence and research group IDC. They track Blackberry, Apple and Nokia. Thanks for being with us. Now, let's start with the hot topic right now, but I want to get into how Blackberry is faring against this competition in a moment. Right now, it could get kicked out of many Middle Eastern countries and possibly India. Where do you stand on this debate? Should Blackberry offer up its customers' data to these countries? They do have reasonable concerns.
Yeah, definitely. There's a strong concern about what was recently announced, and but in my opinion, RIM, Research in Motion, will have to come up with a solution. This is a quite fast-growing market to the Canadian company, and they will have to reach an agreement with local governments to overcome this issue, because definitely they are growing very fast, and it's a quite important market for them.
Well, now this is worrying. I'm just going to quote you the Research in Motion's Chief Technology Officer, David Yak, in an interview with Reuters. He says, "I believe they'll have trouble pulling the trigger to shut down BlackBerry. Most governments in the world rely on BlackBerry." What do you think of those comments from here? And I can tell you, Do and Etisalat are already offering their customers iPhones in exchange for their BlackBerries. Is this just a sign of a company that doesn't understand its overseas market?
No, they have their own services relying and they have developed their products based on security, and with all these issues and all the governments wanting to overtaking this issue and to be able to access the service, they will have to come up with a solution, because otherwise what we have seen in some other countries is basically governments are looking to other companies like Nokia and even Apple, and considering to have their staff using Nokia devices or the iPhone, and what it was one of the selling points of BlackBerry, the security, is becoming a problem to the Canadian company. So definitely they will have to find out a solution, not just in this region, but as well in some other regions, and even in Europe.
I suppose this could also underscore BlackBerry's problems. It had virtually locked out this market, but now that Apple and Google's Android phone have entered the fray, they are really making inroads into its market share. Has BlackBerry just been caught out by better technology or better marketing? It's
basically they have better marketing, and then they have better technology. BlackBerry devices are based on security, and all this issue somehow is for a good reason. It's because their devices are really secure, and they were able to provide, along with the security to governments, they were able to provide a very good user experience to consumers. Take the example of teenagers. They are using BlackBerries, while 1, 2, 3 years ago that wasn't possible, because it was always seen as a device for corporate users and professionals. And nowadays consumers are adopting BlackBerry devices, and the BlackBerry Torch 9800 is one of the best examples how BlackBerry and RIM are trying to track and to attract consumers to their devices.
Francisco Geronimo, many thanks for your time. Well, now, last week, Dan Nolan brought us the plight of 38 migrant workers trapped in Dubai with no money. The men from Bangladesh and Pakistan were abandoned by their employer, owing them 10 months' pay. They're surviving on charity. They cannot work or afford a flight home. Labour officials say their hands are tied because the men's case went to court. That was almost 5 months ago. Well, despite the plight of those men, many say they still want to work in the Gulf, and that's because it's the only place they can earn a living. And as Purna Suri reports from Malappuram in northern Kerala, India, millions are keen to follow.
Not open yet, but a crowd has already gathered. Dozens of people wait anxiously outside this office to apply for that much sought-after document, a passport. For many here, it's not just a travel document, it's a ticket to a better life.
This is just a small slice of the hunger that people here in Kerala have to look for work abroad. High rates of unemployment have meant that 90% of the people here are looking towards the Gulf countries for work, and they're hoping that this is the first step towards making their dreams come true.
Kerala's most famous export is its manpower. Every year, over 2 million people from here travel to work abroad, mainly to the Middle East and the Gulf countries. A thriving industry of travel and visa agents have mushroomed here, cashing in on the Gulf dream. This is Marvel Road in Kozhikode city. a street famous for being a one-stop shop for visas and tickets. For $2,000, agents like these guarantee documents and employment to eager hopefuls. But many are cheated and come back home. Santosh lost his job 6 months ago when the Dubai construction company he worked for was hit by the economic crisis. The same company which built Dubai's largest mall now refuses to pay him back more than $1,200, a fortune with which he could complete his unfinished house. He tried calling his former bosses in front of us.
Yeah, I am Santosh from your staff. Now I never get my salary. The balance amount. Huh?
But was told the person no longer works there, and his money in all probability will never be paid.
Oh.
You feel sad looking at your unfinished house?
Yes. I want to finish this. Company is give to the money, then I can make little or little.
But this doesn't stop others from dreaming of a better life abroad. Desperate poverty has meant that many like Sajid want to escape at any cost. He tells me the sacrifices he had to make to get his visa for Dubai.
I took out a loan of $5,000 to pay an agent for my visa and air tickets. My wife's jewelry had to be kept with him as security. But I'm hoping to pay this off when I earn there.
Sajid will make between $100 and $150 a month working overseas. It will take him years just to pay off the agency fees. That is, if he gets paid at all. The constant demand for cheap labor and the chance of making some kind of wage one day means more people like Sajid and Santosh will continue to flock to jobs overseas. But the journeys they take are unlikely to be better than the places they're leaving behind.
As always, you can catch up with the program online in its various guises on Twitter at AJ Counting Cost. And you can also hit the program's link at aljazeera.net/English to get to our main page. This episode will be posted there in full, along with previous shows, blogs, and web-only content. Now, that is it for this edition of Counting the Cost. I'm Hazem Seeker from the whole team, though. Thanks for joining us.